Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's episode 6. Andrew Whitelaw, Chris Cannon. We are M2MMA. Always lots to discuss. What's up, Chris? How's it going?
Well, like you, mate, I'm a very happy man. I'm glad to see you representing Arsenal after a good weekend for us.
Fantastic 4-1 win over Spurs. We'll have to resist talking about that too much. But
supposed to be a combat sports podcast.
Yeah, exactly. UFC Qatar was not without drama. What did you think?
Well, obviously I put out a little prediction video on Friday and I was correct in both. Perhaps obviously the heavy favourites, I would say, but I thought Garry did what Garry does. He a very clinical striker, gets the job done. Did I think it was spectacular? No, but has anyone really been spectacular against Muhammad? And then obviously Tsarukyan was, dominant, really dominant. And I think without doubt he's proven he is ready for the title shot.
So let's start with that main event. Very difficult to make a big statement against Belal Muhammad, you're right. Just getting the victory, I think, shows, like him or not, how good Ian Garry is. He's so effective. I find him pretty well-rounded. Technically, his striking is strong. His takedown defense is formidable. And he did everything right on the microphone. Even the altercation with Khamzat Chimaev creates that heat, creates that buzz. He knows full well what he's doing. Now, you can point the finger at Khamzat, yes. But it's like going into a lion's cage and going to ask if it wants a cup of tea. Oh, I was only asking if we wanted a cup of tea. Come on, you knew full well that if you started to poke or provoke or even have a cheeky facial expression in the wrong direction towards the champ, that you are poking the bear, you are playing with fire. The reaction was inevitable, and I think Ian Garry got exactly what he wanted.
But don't you think that's a little bit of the... When I look at Ian Machado Garry, as you probably should reference him, and I can't quite tell who he is. There's certain characters you get in combat sports. They say there's the Conor McGregors of the world, or there's the very respectable, like Makhachev type characters who are always straight down the line. There's never any drama from them. And Garry, I just still can't tell who he's trying to be. And I don't know if that's just me, but I don't know what your thoughts are. And I think he's a little bit in between. Is he actually the well-mannered, nice guy, the martial artist who is... Or is he trying to, poke the bear, so to speak? Does he want to be that flamboyant, controversial character? And even in the way he fights as well, part of me thinks he's almost spectacular, but at the same time he's very clinical and almost not that entertaining to watch. I don't know what your thoughts are.
A lot of people say that he's difficult to like. A lot of fighters have said this. A lot of the tweets, the outlets that round up all the tweets after the fight. And the general consensus was, say what you will about Ian Machado Garry, he's very good, like it or not, but he's also very difficult to like. This, whatever your opinion is, that's just an accurate portrayal of the general...
Well, I think that's my point, right? Is that people tend to gravitate to one side or the other. Some people love the bad guys. Some people like the good guys. But for me, he's kind of in between. I don't know which one he's trying to be. And obviously, he's had previous issues with Leon Edwards and the fight camp there and so on. And yeah, I watched that again and I just think either properly provoke him or just, I don't know, I'm trying to understand what he's looking at. But again, what do you think about him fighting Makhachev? Do you think he's earned it?
If you're Shavkat Rakhmonov, you're feeling pretty hard done by. You have a win over Ian Machado Garry. You're undefeated. I believe he's 19-0. You got injured, right at the end of last year. You're now fit again. This is where it comes into play. Maybe it's time for Shavkat to make a bit of noise. I'm not saying be abrasive, be obnoxious, but remind everyone that you're there. Now, whether you need to do this via a team, and it doesn't always have to be coming out with a video, slating people, being an idiot. But you have to remind people that you're the best. You're the undefeated number one contender. How do you do that? Well, that's up to him and his team. But there are multiple ways to do it. But I think it's time now where the team does come into play. Now you need to give him a helping hand. He's one of the biggest, or should be one of the biggest stars in the UFC. This is where your team says, okay, let's put this piece of content out. This brings me to back to Ian Machado Garry, though. And I'm very delicate when it comes to talking about his wife, because a lot's been said that shouldn't be said about his wife. But all I'll say is, I've come from a football background, and I think she's worked for a couple of the same companies as me doing football content. She is a content person. She's very content driven. And I've seen some of Ian's content, and you often hear him say, oh, this will be great content. And sometimes, maybe it's the other side of the coin to Shavkat. I think Ian is too hyper aware of the content side of the game. And I do think that in some regards, his wife is pulling the strings and pushing him in certain directions to say, oh, this will go viral. And that's a trap that fighters can fall into when it doesn't come off as authentic. You can get some pushback by the fans, and we're seeing that. So,
well, that's my point. Is he authentic?
I don't think so. And I don't think he's very exciting to watch. I wouldn't pay lots of money to see an Ian Machado Garry fight. I'm sorry, I just wouldn't. And we talk about this welterweight division. I don't think Shavkat is overly exciting. Belal Muhammad isn't overly exciting. There are two guys who are. One of them's called Carlos Prates, and the other is Morales. Those are the two most exciting guys in the division. Now, Prates is, as I put out a graphic on this, 99 times out of 100, he gets beaten by Islam. Morales, on the other hand, now he is that guy. One more win for him. Maybe him and Prates need to fight, but one more win for him, and he's the guy who has it all. He's the guy I want to see fighting for a title.
I agree. I think he is probably the strongest contender out of them all. But let's play UFC matchmaker right now. Who do we make the next three fights?
Prates and Morales, just because it's going to be so much fun. And
See, I wouldn't make that fight.
Really?
I would keep them. I would keep them apart a little bit longer. I saw someone put up that graph the other day. I would actually keep them apart until either it's a fight for the title, like the spot, the number one contender, or even the title. For me, because I think that's going to be such an interesting striking contest, I would keep them apart one more fight either. I'd maybe put one of them against Della Maddalena, one of them against Muhammad, and then you got the question of who do you give Garry to Makhachev, which again, from a selling standpoint, is probably the fight to make given the Irish-Dagestani rivalry previously. But I agree with you, Shavkat deserves it, but I think he may get drowned out by the Garry noise and that whole rivalry. And in that case, I think they make Garry versus Makhachev. I think Shavkat takes on the winner of that. I think you get Prates versus Prates fights Muhammad or Della Maddalena and the other side of that coin. And then you remix after that. But I would keep those two guys apart for a little bit longer.
I like your thinking there. Sometimes if you match both of them together, you almost dim the shine of one of them, whereas you can maintain the momentum if you keep them going. I would try to avoid as best I can giving Prates a wrestler who's going to smother him. That said, if you pair him with someone like Belal Muhammad and he knocks him out, he's right in there.
Yeah, I think Muhammad would probably be the matchup for him because, yes, Muhammad may be a little bit, but he's an all-rounder. He's just a solid all-rounder, and I think that would be the good matchup for him. And then Della Maddalena versus Morales, I think, would be a great... So those are the two I would go. But it will be very interesting which way the UFC goes between Rakhmonov and Machado Garry. But it's a fascinating division. Certainly the best, in my opinion, out there right now. And then if we go back down to lightweight, Tsarukyan versus Topuria, what do you reckon?
Chris, Kamaru Usman. We cannot just brush over Kamaru Usman because if you look at what Ariel Helwani was saying, he thinks the UFC are actually going to give him the shot, which would be madness in Helwani's words. The only merit you can say is a former pound-for-pound number one versus the current pound-for-pound number one. Kamaru Usman is 38, so it's now or never. The others have time on their hands. And you might forget that Usman, within this year, has a win over Joaquin Buckley, who himself was quite an exciting contender on a tear. So before Usman's knees completely blow out, maybe we have to just make that fight. And then it builds the aura, the legacy around the champion that little bit more. You've taken out one of the GOATs of the division.
Well, maybe you give either Garry or Rakhmonov Usman and the other guy gets to fight Makhachev.
You can have a lot of fun with it. We'll have to put out a matchmaker graphic after this.
Yeah, but I think that is why that division is so fascinating. And that's exactly what you want from any combat sports promotion. You want lots of great fights to make. And I think we have previously spoken, there's a few divisions right now, there's a little bit of a lull, where what are the matches to make? Like, who are the rivalries you want to see? And it's not just fighting for the title. What makes UFC so great with their ranking system and that great structure, which is why it built the momentum it did over the years, is that you had a very clear top 15 and you saw the guys working their way out, fighting one another, fighting for the right to fight for the title. Whereas we'll get into boxing.
Because if you make Belal Muhammad versus Shavkat, I'm not sure that I'm falling head over heels to buy that pay-per-view.
100%. That's also why, again, I think you keep them apart, those two guys, Morales and Prates, a little bit longer. Because both of us want to watch those guys fight. We ideally want to see. So it's a great division. There's so many fans. And again, it really has, I think, reignited my interest in that division massively.
Does that shove between Garry and Chimaev maybe tip the balance in his favour? Because the UFC love that. It's perfect promo material. You can already see it, can't you? In all the build-up features.
That's why, for me, he's going to get the shot over Rakhmonov. They'll claim that Rakhmonov needs time to work his way back from his injury, which might be the case, and maybe not a bad idea for Shavkat. If he's that good, he'll get his opportunity down the line. And likely, I would say, Makhachev will beat Garry. And then the opportunity will come for him. So again, in the UFC, if they want to make as many great matchups as possible, make the most of this opportunity to put the Dagestanis versus the Russians again, build on this whole momentum around Ian Machado Garry right now, and make that match. For me, that's the one they will make.
Can I ask, you may have seen a video I did on this, how big of a star is Michael Morales?
Well, not yet. Right, he's still got to work his way up there. He's definitely a star in the making. He's got the credentials to be so. But there's a lot of things that go into being a star, remember? And again, maybe I haven't paid enough attention to him on his way up, but it's also the aura outside the cage as well, as we've been speaking about previously, that makes a star. But certainly from a performance standpoint and the way he adjusted his technique, as we mentioned last week, to be prepared for a wrestling matchup, to me, that shows high-level IQ, and I think I would expect him to be a star down the line. But we'll see. And again, there's a lot of hurdles to overcome on the way to the top, and we'll see how he handles it.
I just like the fact that there are parallels to McGregor for me. The way that he's got Ecuador behind him, McGregor had Ireland. The way he turned up to the presser in the big fluffy coat with pink hair. His athleticism, the guy can stand on his head. His mother taught him judo from 5 years old. He's got that judoka background. And he turned up dressed like Spider-Man. He's got that kind of gimmick working in his favour. There are elements there that I'm keeping a heavy eye on with Morales. You know how much I think the UFC of this era needs stars. So I've earmarked him as one, as you say, on his way up. So we will move on then. Arman Tsarukyan, Dan Hooker. Gotta love Dan Hooker. As game as they come. Has he got the talent to match his bravery? Not always, I'd say, in terms of
Well, I liked what did he say recently? He basically called himself the gatekeeper, didn't he? Which I think, again, you've got to admire the guy. Give him in terms of a warrior, a fighter. I mean, is there any better representation than Dan Hooker than that?
Yeah, he's a fighter's fighter and a fan favourite for that reason.
Well, again, the idea that a guy who will say no to no one, whoever comes his way, he'll take them on, and he'll just stand there, and that's why. And we talked previously as well, in terms of people you want to watch, and I think about your Nate Diaz, your Justin Gaethjes, your Max Holloways, your Dustin Poiriers. These are the guys, even if they're not fighting for titles, you want to watch them compete because you always know they're going to give you action and they will not back down a yard. And when we talk about Ian Machado Garry, you said how entertaining is he to watch? It's that outside striking, and even for me, that's going to be a bit of a controversial take. And to me, he's a little bit of a poor man's Israel Adesanya right now. And maybe he'll step up, and maybe he might be more well-rounded, perhaps, than Adesanya in terms of his takedown defense and so on. But as yet, he's yet to show the devastating knockout, incredible striking that Adesanya has, but fights in a very similar way, almost point fighting from the outside. And do you want to watch that? Or would you rather watch Dan Hooker go toe-to-toe and go out on his shield?
know what I'd rather watch. The only question mark for me was, I don't know if you saw, Dan Hooker was saying that his friend had had a massage in the hotel and the masseuse had said that Arman had said that his back was effed. And I was just thinking, well, he's been out a year. The only question mark is, how injury-free is he going into that octagon? But the guy looked elite. And remember, he's given Islam one of the toughest fights of his career. I think it was Arman's MMA debut, wasn't it, in the UAE? And he gave Islam a proper battle. He's also unbelievably flexible. I don't know if you recall that photo of the axe kick where he's got his leg up here. Well, it's a bit dodgy. But, yeah. He's a multi-talented guy, and he's got a fascinating backstory. They call him Bruce Wayne because he was born into money. You know, the guy's got a collection of sports cars. He fights because he wants to, not because he has to, which makes him a very unique individual. Most people fight because they're trying to put food on the table. This is their...
Now, see, that in itself is a very interesting, not debate to have, but something very interesting to investigate. Like, what is more powerful? Someone that chooses to fight because they absolutely love it and they want to dominate and be the best, or someone that has to fight because they're fighting to fight their way out of wherever situation they've come from. And again, I agree with it. It's a fascinating storyline with him. And with, obviously, the financial power behind him, he's had access, I'm sure, to the best facilities, the best trainers, everything that you can imagine. Now, when it comes to a battle of will, let's say your Islam versus Tsarukyan, or even Ilia Topuria versus Tsarukyan, which we're likely to see now, which is two absolutely elite level athletes, which one comes out on top?
Arman Tsarukyan has everything. I think he's really fascinating. He's going to potentially put on a classic here.
Well, I think it could be, I would say, Topuria's biggest challenge to date, without a doubt.
I want to see more of Topuria's wrestling challenge, don't you? Because he's got this fantastic Georgian wrestling base, but he's got these titanium hands, and when he touches you, you get folded. So he hasn't really had to use it, and I think Tsarukyan brings the best out of him there.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great matchup. And again, I think it's, with a little bit of a shuffle from obviously Islam moving up and, Topuria moving up. And as I say, sadly, we are seeing this now shift from those stars that we've been watching for the last 10 years of your Gages, Holloways and Purias moving on from that lightweight division, which historically has always been one of the most entertaining, exciting to watch and of the highest quality. That I think that a little bit of a reshuffle now and Tsarukyan coming through, like they need that fight, Topuria versus Tsarukyan. And I know Paddy the Baddie's waiting in the background, making a lot of noise. But for me, he's nowhere near the level of those two right now. And that is going to be the matchup. Where we go from there, I don't know. But I cannot wait to see that.
You've got to do Tsarukyan Topuria. Then, if by some chance, I give him a 40% chance, actually, Tsarukyan beats Topuria, then can you entice Islam back down for the rematch? It's still a super fight. It's still got a backstory. Now, the other one, of course, I think we have to see Topuria versus Paddy the Baddie. There's too much spice. There's too much intrigue. There's too much viral material. It's a fight that has to happen. I give Paddy about a 5 or 10% chance of winning that fight, but it's just enough to make you question, to make you think, to make you doubt the outcome. Just enough to get you interested. And I think Fight Week itself will be box office. That fight has to happen no matter what. And again, sometimes if you wait too long, the moment passes you by. The interesting thing this weekend, though, I'm not sure if you saw the airport interview with Islam, and he said, look, because everyone's talking about this White House super fight, aren't they? Islam coming back down to finally face Topuria, the two biggest stars in the UFC, going toe-to-toe. And he said, look, you're going to have to pay me a lot of money, because I am getting older and this weight cut is killing me. And there's only so many weight cuts you can do in your career.
So I didn't see that.
Lost to Kyoji Horiguchi, and he said he was completely ruined in the fight, and he almost thought about calling it off. But the guy's such a warrior, he let him go. But he was saying he lost to Horiguchi because of the weight cut. And again, it's a recurring topic, but fighters have to fight at their optimum weight utilize data to get you there, because Islam, it's shown, is now pure welterweight, and he's where he belongs.
And that's why I just do not see that fight happening at lightweight. Again, like, I was interested. I didn't hear that, but I'm interested he actually gave somewhat of an open door to the idea that he could drop down again if he was paid enough. But I think more likely, should Topuria beat Tsarukyan, he will fancy being the first ever triple champ and going up to welterweight, because I just think he seems like that kind of guy, and that would be the bigger fight. If you want to like create some history and sell a storyline, him going up to fight Makhachev, I think would suit both parties, even if perhaps it certainly weights it more in Makhachev's favour.
Let me check the height of Ilia Topuria one more time. 5'7".
That's a long way. Like, what's Makhachev? 5'11" or something.
Yeah, I mean, look. Well, I'm not going to guess for you. I'll check. But a 5'7" welterweight champion. My goodness.
I didn't realise he was that short.
No, but look, you're not the first to say it. It has been mooted, right? And that would make it all the more remarkable. I mean, Kamaru Usman's not that tall, is he? But he's much thicker.
Yeah, I mean, the argument for that. Again, I'm not enough of an expert to determine this, but in terms of preventing the takedown from Makhachev, being a little bit lower to the ground in that, his boxing stance, it may not be that much of a disadvantage. The disadvantage if you are the type of striker from the outside and you significantly, let's say, you are significantly disadvantaged in your reach, then perhaps, yes. But the way, Topuria likes to get in close and fight within that, and that's where he does his best striking. So, maybe it won't be terrible, but what is Makhachev? Did you check?
5'10".
Yeah. Well, 3 inches is not the worst difference in the world, is it? Or it can make a big difference.
Volk is certainly shorter than 5'7", so Volk did it.
Sorry?
Volk is shorter than 5'7", and he did it. He faced Islam.
Yeah, exactly. I think... Anyway, I'm giving my prediction now that if those two do fight, it will be at 170.
Who's going to win?
Oh, Islam.
What percentage chance do you give Ilia? Because it doesn't matter how big you are, if Ilia Topuria catches you on the chin, and I don't know who said it, but Ilia Topuria could knock out heavyweights, and I believe him.
Well, after seeing what he did to... Remember, Holloway had never been knocked out, had he? And Volk had never been knocked out. Just my memory, but the way he flatlined those two guys, like the power in those hands is undeniable.
I think Volk had been knocked out by Islam, but yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Sentiment behind what you're saying is totally correct. What Ilia is doing to people has not been done.
And actually, sorry, that's reminded me of a good example of when an athlete gets knocked out, the impact that has going forward for them. You see this time and time again. Like, we obviously talked about Volk came back too quickly, didn't he, after that? And when we talk about head injuries and concussions and protecting athletes, I think that's a huge area we can work on as well. What is the ideal recovery time for an athlete? And then the only way we can do that properly is through data.
100%. Where do you put Charles Oliveira in this picture, by the way?
Again, I think his time at the top is gone. I think he becomes similar to a Dan Hooker, drops down a little bit and starts to become, I hate obviously the word that Hooker used, a little bit of a gatekeeper for those guys working their way. But ultimately, it depends on who's coming through. If there's not enough fights to come, and that's where I think you are seeing this jumping around a little bit in those lower down divisions, because and obviously Merab's going to fight Peter Yan again, right? But again, there's a little bit of a problem in that division as well. Like, who's coming through to challenge Merab? Now, same with Pantoja. Who's going to challenge for flyweight? Because he's a little bit stuck as well, and he said he won't go up and fight Merab. So Oliveira might get another shot at a big fight at the title, but does he deserve it? Probably not at this point now. But if there's no one coming through, maybe he does.
If we say that we have to do Tsarukyan versus Topuria for the title, which I'm inclined to say that we do.
Yeah,
what
definitely.
Do we do with Paddy Pimblett? Paddy Pimblett's number 5 in the division. if you give him to a Charles Oliveira, then you risk that Topuria fight, which is a money fight. You risk that disappearing entirely. Do you give Paddy Pimblett somebody like Dan Hooker?
I'd love to see it. However, this is where the business side comes in, and this is where the UFC have done a great job over their history and turning their sports promotion into a business. They balance that line between what is right from a competitive standpoint and what is right from a business standpoint. From a business standpoint, you sit Paddy the Baddy out and make sure he doesn't get knocked out or beaten, so you can sell that Topuria fight. But whether or not you can keep him on the sidelines that long, I don't know. And it's going back to the welterweight division, as we said, you kind of need to make this Machado Garry fight now, right? While it's hot against Makhachev, because it's the biggest, the best seller. But does it earn it from a competitive standpoint? No, it should be Rakhmonov. But so again, I think the UFC will find a way to sit him out, in my opinion.
I think you pair him with someone like Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker's currently 6th, Paddy's 5th. We're in the fight business, not the tickling business. It's a banger fight. It's a fight that you can sell. And if Paddy the Baddy is worth his salt, and remember, he has beaten people like Michael Chandler, he should be able to beat Dan Hooker, and it should be a whole lot of fun.
I agree. I think
Dan Hooker, he should be nowhere near Ilia Topuria. So I'd say make the fight.
Yeah, they should do. Whether or not they will, I'm not 100% sure on that.
What else is going on with you? What's going on with M2MMA? Any big news?
Well, I just wanted to talk a bit about the boxing first before we get on to MMA, M2MMA. There was a massive card in Riyadh this weekend and some great title fights, but also on the back of it reminded me a little bit of the problem with what's going on in boxing right now. And we've obviously just been spending 25 minutes talking about matchmaking. And you got Benavidez calling out Dimitri Bivol and claiming he won't fight him. You've got Gervonta Davis, who won again in pretty unexceptional style and was criticised heavily by a number of people around his style again, especially with Turki Al-Sheikh watching, and who's previously made an issue about fighters not backing off and making sure they move forward. And Conor Benn's waiting there calling out Gervonta Davis. Gervonta Davis sounds like he's trying to duck Conor Benn, to be honest. And you've got this same issue going on. That's again why UFC has made such headway. It's because they have control of the matchmaking. And it has changed a little bit in boxing in recent years since Turki Al-Sheikh has come along and Riyadh season. They put the money in basically to bring the promoters together and making the big fights happen. That's why boxing has seen a rejuvenation. But now we have obviously Dana White and Zuffa Boxing coming along, creating a promotion-style boxing organization. I think they had 19 events lined up next year as part of their deal with Paramount and the UFC and so on. And I'm just fascinated to see how that's going to go going forward. I know we haven't really got into it much, and there's still a lot to be found out how that's going to play out. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see, because that has been the issue of boxing. And again, I was reminded watching these people call each other out afterwards, that ultimately no one's got real control over that. It's not like Dana White who says, right, Topuria has to fight Tsarukyan, or Makhachev has to fight Machado Garry. In boxing, you've now got this whole thing that has to go on where you have to bring the fighters together. And obviously the big story in boxing right now is AJ versus Paul, right? And then there's the other side of boxing where you can make these somewhat ludicrous fights because, again, it's not a competitive promotion situation. So what are your thoughts on that fight?
Firstly, this is the first time that I might be compelled to watch a Jake Paul fight. Now, most of you will be familiar with the terms the face and the heel that come from pro wrestling. Throughout his career, Jake Paul has played the role of the heel, where his whole impetus is to make you hate him enough that you will buy the pay-per-view at the prospect of him getting knocked out. Hasn't really happened so far, has it? He's only ever lost to Tommy Fury. He usually stacks the odds so much in his favor that it's him doing the knocking out, whether it's facing a veteran, a guy who doesn't actually box, an influencer, whatever it might be, a guy who's a geriatric, let alone a veteran, right? This time, you have to wonder what his team have been saying to him. How many yes men has he actually got behind him? Because I commend the bravery of Jake Paul. I just think it's now bordering on delusion. This fight is dangerous. Anthony Joshua is so much bigger, so much better, that not only are we going to see Jake Paul get flatlined, we might see him get hospitalized. This might have taken the prospect of entertainment too far. As a society, we are degenerates. We like to watch people we don't like get knocked out. There's something in us. This might be too much. Jake Paul's bitten off more than he can chew, and it has intrigued me. I love Anthony Joshua, and I think he's got to put this guy away and do it handsomely for the sake of boxing. All the expectation is that he destroys Jake Paul, and he has to live up to that now. Jake Paul has to make sure he doesn't get himself seriously hurt so he can stride off to the bank and cash those big checks.
Well, with that being said, and a lot of people are saying they reckon it might be fixed again, and a lot of people have claimed that about Jake Paul fights previously. Because, as you said, if it is free to reign, I know they're in 10-ounce gloves and there's a few restrictions as opposed to a normal fight, but, and a few less rounds and so on. But it is dangerous. Like, it shouldn't be technically really happening because of the size difference and also the quality difference. So with the fact it is genuinely dangerous, do you think they'd allow him to put himself in that situation in a genuine fight? Or do you think there may be some rules behind it? Because a lot of people are claiming that around various Jake Paul fights.
Yeah, often he is able to stack the rules in his favour through various conditions, isn't he? One thing that some outlets were saying, AJ's got to get down to 245 pounds. So what? As if he couldn't absolutely obliterate Jake Paul at 245 pounds. I really didn't see that as such a big deal. The thing that sticks out to me is what he did to Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou can take a punch, is a huge unit of a man. And AJ put the hurt on him. I just can't help but feel, as I said before, Jake Paul has let his ego get the better of him here, because ultimately you have to credit him whether the stipulations were in his favour or not. Putting away the likes of Anderson Silva, Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley, Nate Diaz, all these guys. Yeah, some of them are old, some of them are...
No, to me they're credible. Those are very credible wins, in my opinion.
It's pretty impressive. And look, he did face a legitimate boxer in Tommy Fury. It's a cruiserweight, though, remember. He's no Anthony Joshua. I just think Jake Paul is working really hard. He's become a fair boxer, a fair middle-of-the-road boxer, a guy who will never be a world champion, in my opinion, but a decent boxer, and you have to respect the endeavour that he's put in, the ambition, and his ability to sell fights. You cannot knock that. I don't like the guy, but you can't knock that. I just think his ego and delusion has ran away with him to the point of danger.
I mean, you go from fighting Gervonta Davis, as we've just spoken about, who's probably, in terms of a boxing and also style, the complete opposite of an Anthony Joshua. You go from fighting like 150 to fucking a 250-pound fighter. For me, obviously, I've got a bit of a personal attachment to Anthony. Like, my brother-in-law manages him. I try and put myself in his shoes. And again, you can't turn down that money. That's, again, obviously he's got lots of money already, but that is, again, generational money you're now talking about. Number two, I like what Chael Sonnen said about when Francis Ngannou turned down the fight to fight Jake Paul. Ngannou gave it this, almost offended that he'd been offered that fight, as if he wasn't being taken seriously. Well, Chael Sonnen turned around and said, if you're a fighter, anyone challenges you, you fight them. That's what you do. It doesn't matter the size of them. If they challenge you, you take on that challenge and you put them away. That's what you do as a fighter. And again, I commend Anthony. A lot of people, he's only got something to lose here, apart from the financial gain. If he doesn't finish him too quickly, people are going to have a go at him. If he goes and kills him, people are going to have a go at him for taking the fight against a guy who's 50 pounds less. So to stand there, but he is taking the fight. So he has been challenged, and he's stepping up and going to go and we'll see. Take this guy, Jake Paul, on. But it's a really interesting one to think about it in the mindset of Anthony Joshua, because you are standing in that ring thinking, he must be thinking, what am I doing here fighting this guy who's so much smaller than me and so much more inexperienced?
Prize fighting. That's the word we need to remember here. We talk about fighting, we talk about athletes, fighters. This is prize fighting, and never forget it. It's true of most industries, even all industries. The prize, the purse, it matters. It has an impact. We live in a capitalist society. Anthony Joshua stands to earn tens of millions of pounds. He will set himself up, his family up, and their family after them. To step into the ring, lace up some gloves, do what he does best, and take out the guy that's in front of him. It's as simple as that. It's brilliant prize fighting. It's brilliant entertainment. It's showmanship. Is it the sport in the purest sense? Is it the best fighting the best? No. But it is great prize fighting.
I agree. And I think he should be commended for not caring what anyone else thinks and stepping up and taking him on. And
I'm sure he'll be able to satiate his doubts with all those stacks of cash.
No. But again, people are questioning his legacy and
on today that I'd really like to hear from you guys if you are watching this. UFC matchmaker, what matches do you like to see in the welterweight and lightweight divisions? And what do you think of Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua? I think we've probably gone over a little bit for today. So M2MMA News, I think, will drop something pretty exciting on next week's episode. But we'll leave it there for today.
As always, a pleasure.
Good to see you, mate.